right, welcome back to NostalgiaCast. I'm Johnny Craddock,
And I'm Darren Lundberg.
and today we're going to be talking about True Romance, 1993 film directed by Tony Scott, starring all of Hollywood. They're all in there. Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette, Gary Oldman, Dennis Hopper, Brad Pitt, Christopher Walken, Val Kilmer, James Gandolfini, Michael Rappaport, Samuel L. Jackson, Bronson Pinchot, Chris Penn, Tom Sizemore, Saul Rubinek. Holy crap.
Oh my
Everyone is in this
gosh.
movie. So it's an all-star cast, and kind of what makes it so great.
Yeah.
Um, but Darren, we're starting a whole new year. This is 1993, so we're kind of getting through our bucket list season, and we're finally in this year, and this is a great way I thought to start the year.
Yeah.
True Romance, one of the movies that just kind of when you showed it to me, man, it just stuck with me for days. I just couldn't stop thinking about it. In
Right.
fact, I have mentioned my history with this movie a little bit because whenever we talk about other movies on this podcast, uh, a story comes up where I was at your house one night and we ended up watching three movies back to back to back. And we stayed up all night watching these movies. And what happened was you said you want to see a movie called True Romance. It's Tarantino written and it's got these all these actors in it. And I was like, yeah, let's watch that. So we watched it and I was like, again, just kind of like shocked at what I just watched. And I was like, holy crap, what was that? And then you said, well, do you want to see another Gary Oldman movie? So I was like, all right. So you popped in Bram Stoker's Dracula. So then we watched, the vampire movie. And then at the end of that, you're like, you want to see another vampire movie? And I was
Right.
like, all right. So you popped in From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah.
So we watched True Romance, Bram Stoker's, and From Dusk Till Dawn. I stayed up all night watching movies, and I drove home just feeling like, why did I do that to myself? That was crazy. That was an experience. So
Yeah.
it's like I say, it always stuck with me. And then, when it came out on DVD, I bought it. And this is one of those movies that when I get excited about something, I watch it over and over and I study it and I look at what they're doing. I look at the direction, look at everything about it just fascinated me. And so I mean, obviously, Tarantino's script was one of the things that I thought was so great.
Yeah.
Tony Scott, one of my favorite movies that he's directed, aside from Crimson Tide and others we talked about.
Right.
But and all the performances. I mean, everybody just brings their A game. I think we can talk about a little more later what we think about some of the acting
Yeah.
performances. But I think for the majority of it, most of them just do an outstanding job, and it's such a fun movie. It takes you for a ride, and I love movies that do that. And so that's why I thought this would be a great one to start the 1993
Yeah.
year. But tell me, what was your first experience with this movie?
Well, 1993 was a murderer's row of classic movies, especially during the cinema and toward the end. Like you look at the list of movies that were released and they're crazy. Just a brief overview of like the box office itself, and we've covered a couple of these or will cover. So worldwide, you had Jurassic Park, number one, obviously, I think $914 million. Mrs. Doubtfire, which we covered, made 441. That's crazy. Jurassic Park more than doubled the amount of Mrs. Doubtfire.
Wow.
And Mrs. Doubtfire making 441. That's still in 93 terms, that is a monster. But it still only made half as much as Jurassic Park. The Fugitive, wow, another great movie. 368 million. Schindler's List, 321. Obviously, that's not going to make $1 billion, but that Schindler's List made $321 million. You
Yeah.
know, touch that many people. The Firm made $270 million. That rounds out the top five. The Firm we talked about obviously on the Rainmaker episode. And if like we can find a reason, maybe we'll talk about that movie itself in the future. Just to round out that top 10, you've got Indecent Proposal, Cliffhanger, Sleepless in Seattle, Philadelphia, and The Pelican Brief. So
Hmm.
again, just looking at that briefly, you've got two Steven Spielberg movies that kind of bookend the top five. You've got two John Grisham movies, The Pelican Brief and The Firm. You've got two Tom Hanks movies rounding out that top 10 with Philadelphia and Sleepless in Seattle. So that's again, we're talking those are all classics, right? And Jurassic Park, as we're talking to like yesterday, the seventh Jurassic Park movie was just released in theaters.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. But all those movies, as great as they are, when I sat down and we've talked about this in Utah before. Like, there are some theaters that we could get into when I was 16. Like, I was 16 when this movie came out. And I rode my bike, or I can't remember if I was able to drive a car yet. But I walked into that theater, and it was one of the theaters where they just waved everybody in. So imagine this 15, 16-year-old kid sitting down to watch True Romance. Now, I'd heard of Reservoir Dogs. I knew that that played in Sundance like the year before, but obviously I wasn't old enough to get out to Sundance and see that. I wasn't old enough to rent the movie. So this True Romance was Tarantino. Like I heard that name, right? I'm like, I've got to see this movie. I have to see it. And everybody talking about it was like it was new wave of cinema. And so as a 16-year-old, you're like, oh, I got to see this. But when I sat down, I still wasn't prepared for this. Like I've just got the list here. It's got Tarantino talking about what does he have? Elvis, kung fu movies, Sonny Chiba, Burt Reynolds, Phil Spector, comic book, Star Trek, John Woo, The Mac with Richard Pryor. It's talking about all these things, and I think we mentioned it during our Crimson Tide episode. Is that we weren't used to, unless it was a movie about movies, like Altman's The Player or something like that. We weren't used to movie characters talking about movies and name dropping other actors. And so when Crimson Tide, they're talking about other submarine movies. Number one, it takes the edge off of, oh, I'm not going to compare this to like Das Boot or anything because they're talking about submarine movies. So they're ahead of me, right? But the fact that Tarantino has all these things for a 16-year-old kid, just the fact that I'm getting this my brain overloading with this information that I'm not used to hearing in movies. I was going crazy in the theater, right? And obviously the violence and there's sex and stuff. So I was like, I can't believe I'm getting away with this. Like a 16-year-old kid watching this. I knew it wasn't, I shouldn't have been there, you know what I mean? But this movie seemed like it was made for me. And I think that's the big thing about Tarantino is he appeals to you that way. Obviously, I've got like I think Tarantino's better when he directs his own stuff. I think there's and we'll talk about that when we talk in a little bit down the line here. But I think Tarantino's gotten better, but this one was the game changer. I'm conflicted about some of it. Like I said, we'll talk about, but this was the one that was kind of like movies can be this. You know what I mean? It can be
Yeah.
everything. Movies, you look at that list of the top 10, which are great movies, but those are all basically one thing, right? Jurassic Park is a horror adventure. Mrs. Doubtfire is a comedy drama. Like The Fugitive obviously is an action movie. Schindler's List, World War II thing. But this movie is like what? It's like a romance. It's like a gangster
Everything.
movie. It's everything, right? It's just your brain can't handle it. And I think the same thing was with critics like Roger Ebert or Kenneth Turan or Janet Maslin. Like they were all just kind of, what is this? Like I think Ebert said it was like this is a movie that was spun out of the cliche factory because everything in every movie is in here. But I don't know. Does that make sense? When I talk about those top 10, this is like a completely different animal as solid as those movies are, this is something completely different. And I think that's what we're after when we watch movies.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about it being a game changer or different, but Tarantino, I mean, as we know that he's used to kind of pulling from other movies, and then uh,
Right.
you might want to call him a copycat artist. I don't know, but like the directors in the '70s, like Spielberg and Scorsese, they would steal from the movies they grew up with,
Yes.
and kind
Yes.
of incorporate those ideas and themes into their movies. Tarantino's the same way. Like he is the ultimate film nerd. He watched everything, and so
Because he
when you
worked in a video store, right? Where he,
exactly. And so when you see that many movies, you start to kind of like say, well, that works in this movie. Let's try it in my movie. Um, so I mean, what's that saying about good artists and great artists? Like good artists borrow and great artists steal.
yeah, exactly.
But anyway, he's definitely someone that pulls from other films.
Well, we obviously we covered that 70s season, which is game-changing movies. But the thing with 70s movies was they were just respun versions of things that we've seen before, right? We said this many like The Godfather was James Cagney movies. Jaws was The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Them was like monster movies, right? It was nothing we hadn't seen before. Star Wars, Flash Gordon, nothing we hadn't seen before, but they the difference is that they took those things and they made them their own. Like it wasn't just a copycat thing. Jaws is a Spielberg movie. The Godfather is a Coppola movie. So they're taking these things and they're making completely new experiences from it, which is so different from what people are doing today, where they're just copying IPs. And again, just Jurassic Park, the new one is you see a shot of like a Velociraptor's feet tapping on the floor, and I'm like, so all you're doing now, guys, is you're just taking in Jurassic Park that shot. Those were actually people that thought through that. How can we give the Velociraptor some life and some personality? Ooh, let's have him tap on the floor from the vantage point of the kids. There's so much creativity to that shot. And then in this latest Jurassic World redone or whatever it's called, you have that same shot. There's no joy. There's no creativity. All they're doing is they're doing that because you've seen it before. Like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? And I think Tarantino is a very 70s filmmaker in that way because he's taking all of these things and making it a completely new experience. And that's the difference between Tarantino and a lot of people that are making movies today.
Yeah, there's a movie that you told me to watch, Badlands,
Right.
1973. I
Right.
think it
Yep.
was starring Martin Sheen and Sissy Spacek.
Right.
And I've
Which
never
oddly
seen.
enough, I was going to choose for our 70s season
Ah,
if we got around to it. So this is a
yeah,
good
I've
way to
never
talk
seen
about
it,
that.
but you said you got to watch this before you watch Romance, just this, if you can see where Tarantino got some of his ideas for this movie now. So I
Yeah.
watched it, and I can see some similarities. Obviously, it's not the same, but
Yeah.
there's definitely things that he used and incorporated. The main thing being the musical theme,
Yeah.
and obviously Hans Zimmer, used that. So let's talk about that for a minute, as far as that musical score, because man, in my opinion, it's one of the best, and it's so fun. In fact, when we made our theme for our NostalgiaCast podcast, I kind of used a xylophone on purpose
Yeah.
as an homage to True Romance. So
Yeah, it's ingrained, right? Well, this is funny because this is what our third Zimmer scored movie that we just did A League of Their Own, right? To close out
background.
1992. We did Backdraft. So the track that he uses, it's a very light what's the word I'm looking for? It's a simple score. There's not a lot of like heavy-handed stuff and it seems like very dreamlike and it seems like one of those silent era filmmaker like movies where you see and then there's somebody just playing along to the images that they see, right? It's kind of like that kind of score where you feel it. But his theme, it's called You're So Cool. I think it's the probably one of his most famous themes. Like you have heard that somewhere before. Even if you don't know if it's from True Romance, even if you don't know if it's from Zimmer, it's very, very similar. But the funny thing is, when we watch movies, Johnny, and it's kind of like sliding back here a little bit. When we watched them as 60, we hadn't seen every 70s movie, right? We hadn't seen every 50s movie. We hadn't dived into those yet. So when you watch True Romance, you think you're watching something completely new. And I think that's very disingenuous because, like you said, Tarantino's a copycat artist. He's basically copying like Ringo Lamb or old Sonny Chiba movies like or anything like that. Stanley Kubrick, The Killing stuff, integrating all of that stuff. He's just taking pieces, like you said. And I think we've talked about this before, like you have to watch movies. You can't watch True Romance and think this is the most original thing I've ever seen because it's not. Like it's taking pieces from everything. And again, you're missing out if you don't. That seems like slander today. Watch more movies, but I think when you do that, it helps you appreciate a movie like this more, right? So
Yeah.
when you hear that Zimmer score, I love it. I love it. I can listen to it over and over again. But when I watch Badlands after this, I was like, so he completely ripped it off. It is so similar, right? That it seems like Carl Orff, who wrote the glass, was it the Gas and How? I think is the name of it. That he should have sued them, right, if he was still alive, because it's copying it so hard. But it's interesting because Tony Scott, again, taking Badlands as inspiration, he had Zimmer copy that 3-minute piece. And what I thought was interesting, it's a guy composed by a guy named Carl Orff, who actually wrote this in the 20s and he wrote it for an educational program called the Orff Schulwerk, which teaches music to kids. It teaches them how to write and perform music,
Mhm.
even if they're not an expert at music. It teaches beginners to experts, and it teaches them with like playing xylophones, playing percussion. It teaches them like through singing, dancing, clapping, snapping along to melodies. It's very childlike. It's like a sense of play, of child's play, how it teaches them to appreciate music from that vantage point. I just think that's wonderful. And when you hear, I get why Tony Scott, if you're going to copy Badlands, you're obviously going to want to copy Glass and How, right? Or Gas and How, because it's got an innocence to it. The xylophone, it's childlike. You mentioned that there's YouTube videos of kids playing this, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so when you see that, I mean, what's the feel that you get from that when watching these like teenagers play this song?
The feeling that I get, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like you said, it, like it's very, like you say, it's innocent sounding.
Yeah.
Um, it's not as simple as you think, though.
Okay.
It's pretty complex, but I mean,
Yeah.
there's a more simple version of it. But I think Zimmer's interpretation of it and what he did to it is far exceeds what they did in Badlands. Like
Yeah.
the one in
Okay.
Badlands was fine, and it just was a little bit simpler, I would say. But Hans Zimmer like took it to a whole new level. I think, and it's really mesmerizing to watch people play it. If you haven't done it, find one of those videos and watch the "You're So Cool" theme because it's
Right.
so fun to watch, and it takes 4 or 5 people to do it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's not as simple as it looks or
yeah, I don't
sounds.
mean to denigrate. It sounds very simple, you know what I mean? But I
Yeah,
love when something's a lot more complicated.
yeah,
You know, which is kind of infuriating because I think Tarantino, his dialogue, like it just comes out of him. Like there's nothing complicated to it. But again, you're not just copying the Gas and How song. You're also copying like the tone. The tone of Badlands is way different. It's a lot dreamier. It's a lot more ironic. The Sissy Spacek, her tone of voice and her timbre in her voice is a lot like Patricia Arquette's in here. So that's very
yeah.
similar. The Badlands was based on the Charles Starkweather, Carol Ann Fugate murder spree, which is also the inspiration for the Jake Busey character in the Frighteners.
Okay.
So that has that connection with movies we've covered before. But again, it has the similar tones, but this goes way off the rails from where Badlands. Badlands is a completely. I think it's a masterwork. It's maybe other than Days of Heaven, it's probably my favorite Terrence Malick movie. But I again Tarantino is just taking these bits and pieces from other movies and he's making them their own. I just think maybe Tarantino would have been a little bit more less obvious with it than Tony Scott is. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I can see that. It's real quick with Badlands. I just want to say how much I really enjoyed Martin Sheen's performance. I that was probably for me the best part about it. I loved watching him. It was so fun to see a young Martin Sheen that looked just like Emilio Estevez,
Yeah.
and he was so good in it. Even though the character is kind of not a good guy, it was still like what a good performance on his part.
Did you
Um,
ever see the movie Wisdom that Emilio Estevez starred in and directed? Did you ever? It was made in '85. Have you ever seen it?
I don't think so.
It's like a dumb student film version of Badlands, where he tries to do the same thing where
No.
Estevez goes on the run with Demi Moore when they were
Okay.
dating at the time. And again, it's funny because there's Wheels Within Wheels, which we'll talk about a little bit more too. But it's like you have Badlands that inspired this, but it also inspired Estevez to make one of the dullest, stupidest beating my chest movies of the 80s, like this, like a 20-year-old, like I'm going to say something important. It's like, man, you don't know what you're talking about yet. Like give it a few years. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that there's that. And then there's literally a scene where the Demi Moore character kills a cop and they have to run. And it's literally them in the front seat. She's crying and it's Emilio Estevez like yelling at himself, which is an exact copy of the scene where Alabama's getting beat up by the Virgil character and Clarence comes in. But there's so much energy to when Clarence yanks Alabama out of there and they're driving off and he's just pounding the steering wheel and it's you feel it. But the
Mhm.
Estevez one is like the dreary, it's so dull. Like it cuts when she's crying and then it cuts back and he's, man, I can't believe, like it's just a weird kind of dead end version of this same thing. It just depends on the direction. It's just kind of a weird kind of triple feature that all
Well,
ties in.
you mentioned Tarantino's script, and didn't he write this script and sell it to make Reservoir Dogs? That's what I thought happened. Isn't that the story?
The way the script was written, this was originally, I think Roger Avery, his co-writer on Pulp Fiction and his partner, like his roommate or something he wrote a script called The Open Road and he gave it to Tarantino to help kind of add stuff to it. And Tarantino handed him like this 500 page like tome it was a mix of Natural Born Killers and True Romance. So it did have, I believe, the Mickey and Mallory character for the first half. And then when they escape from prison, they're chasing after a screenwriter that wrote a movie about their exploits. And the movie that the screenwriter wrote is True Romance. And so that was the second half.
Oh,
But
interesting.
it was 500 pages, so they split it. And then obviously Oliver Stone took it and bastardized or made it his own thing. And then Tony Scott was obviously a huge hero of Tarantino. So that had to be a dream come true. I think he offered Tony Scott to do one of them, and Tony Scott was like, "I kind of would like to do Reservoir Dogs," and Tarantino's like, "But I really want to do that as my directorial debut, right?" And so that's how they split that off. But
Okay.
yeah, he originally wrote True Romance as in his typical elliptical style, where it wasn't all streamlined. And let's just get this out of the way right here. I think
Yeah.
my conflicted feelings about True Romance is Tarantino basically gives us like a Scuds bucket world, right? It's not the kind of world that you and I would want to be involved in. We don't want to run drugs. We don't want to get involved in like death and murder and Mexican standoff, stuff like that. We don't want to be a part of that. And so when Tarantino writes Pulp Fiction or he writes Reservoir Dogs, he writes them out of order. And so there's kind of a detachment to the movies where we're not fully involved. And I think that's Reservoir Dogs is a fun movie, because it doesn't really since it jumps around so much, it doesn't really barrel you down and makes you feel like you're down in the in doldrums. Pulp Fiction, we talked about that scene in the dungeon, right? Which is like we talked about it. It was like, oh, I'm shaking. Look at how naughty I'm being, that kind of thing. It's like, well, that's not really what I want to be watching right now. You know what I mean? But the fact that he plays with the timelines, doesn't, it keeps you emotionally distant. And I think that for Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs, I think that's a plus because getting you involved in these worlds would be a downer, right? It would really bring you down. So with True Romance, Tony Scott, and again, if I'd seen, I was already blown away, Johnny, by the dialogue and everything. What if I wasn't used to the time jumping? What would that have done to my brain, right? So I think Tony Scott was kind of like, well, number one, I don't think people are ready for that kind of thing, right? I mean, this was his Reservoir Dogs is not a mainstream movie. That was an indie production. This is the first Hollywood major movie, right? And so I think Tony Scott, number one, was like, well, that might be too much for people. Also, he wanted to tell the streamline so you could get the Alabama Clarence relationship a
Yeah.
little more in tune, right?
Yeah.
But that's where my conflict is. Like the original, I'll just read you how the original script goes. It starts off with the bar intro where Clarence is talking about Elvis. It cuts to the Drexel intro where they're in the hotel. There's a lot of dialogue about cunnilingus. Like it goes on for a couple pages. And so I'm glad they cut that out. You cut to Cliff's trailer where Clarence and Alabama show up at his dad's trailer and they're talking about stuff. Then it's Dick Ritchie's audition. It cuts to back to Cliff and Clarence fighting, cuts back to Dick's apartment where Clarence and Alabama show up, and then it cuts back to the Clifford Ciccotti confrontation with Christopher Walken and Dennis Hopper. And then it cuts back again to Dick talking to Clarence about, well, how did you guys meet? And then it does the theater, the diner, the comic shop, the apartment. And basically from that point on, it's the same script.
Okay.
But Tarantino's idea was he wanted you to not understand, like you're behind on the story. You don't understand what the characters are talking. It's hard to, did Clarence actually kill people? How did he get these drugs? I don't know what's going on. And then they explain everything to catch up. And then it does the thing where you have the mob guys getting ready and then you have the cops getting ready. And so the third act now is we know what the characters don't. So I think that's a very interesting structure.
Yeah.
And my issue with the movie is when you streamline it, it feels like by the end, it feels like I've got the weight on my shoulders. And so I'm just punished by the end of this movie. And for me, and like I said, here's the conflict. For me, I would have liked it better. I wouldn't have felt that. It would have been a much more fun movie instead of a tough movie with fun parts. It would have been a much easier to swallow movie. But the problem is, if you tell it elliptically out of order, you're really taking away from that Clarence Alabama romance, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to feel it as much. You don't enjoy these people and what they're going through because again, you've got that detachment. I don't know. I just think that Tony Scott's visuals are so intense that when you add it to Tarantino's intense dialogue, intense characters, it feels like a lot. It feels like a lot. So I don't know if the structures was what beats me down or the Tony Scott like typical style that he does, which is you want it from Tony Scott, right? I don't know. Am I making sense? It's just
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what I would like better.
I mean, I could see possibly a Tarantino version of this and possibly like the movie. I could see how it could be told out of order and it could make sense in a
Yeah,
Tarantino movie. If he had directed
right.
it and done it the way he wanted to do it, it probably would have worked. I mean, I know the ending would have been different. I know, didn't he have it where Clarence dies in the end or something like that?
Yeah, he gets
So,
killed.
however, having seen it the way it's been put out to us, like chronologically and in order and all that, like it makes more sense to me. And I like that you have the romance relationship and you have that exposition and you have that you're invested with those characters.
Yeah,
And then at the end, the payoff is there when they get they live happily ever after and they have their son in Cancun or wherever. All that
right.
stuff. It's more rewarding and
True.
satisfying for a viewer. So maybe it would have worked out of order, but I will say I'm glad Tony Scott got his way and he got the version he wanted.
Okay. Okay. So you're saying it might not have the juxtaposing different timelines might not have worked from the Tony Scott perspective, maybe.
Yeah,
Okay.
like I say, Tarantino probably could have made it work,
Right.
but
Okay.
because of Tony Scott was directing it, I think it was probably a better choice to tell it in order and give him the ending that he wanted.
Right. And because of that, I think that this movie works better in pieces. Like I this was the first time watching the movie completely, and I can't tell you how many years. I think Lindsay said in our phrasing can episode, this is the first time that was the first time she watched the movie this century, right? And I think this is the first time I actually sat down and watched True Romance from beginning to end this century. Because usually I just watch bits and pieces. There are pieces of this movie that I adore. I
Mm.
love parts of this movie, but as a whole, I just think it's kind of punishing. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that then. Let's get into what we really want to talk about. That is
All right.
all the performances.
Yeah.
Um, let's start with the best. We'll go from best to worst.
Okay.
I think
Oh,
I
well, I don't think there's a worst. I'm just maybe best to least best, maybe. Well, because I think that
least
everybody
best.
is good. Yeah.
Yeah. But I know what you want to talk about, so let's go ahead and go there first. The Dennis Hopper, Christopher Walken scene. So give me your thoughts, man. What do you think?
Number one, that's a movie in itself. Like that is really a movie. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end to that scene, right? You have the introduction where you find out that that the kids are actually being stalked by the Blue Lou Boyle character, right? And Cacody's there as kind of his emissary. And then you have the whole scene where you get the threats and they cut Clifford's hand, like they punch him in the face, all this stuff. And then you have the climax where Clifford actually takes back a lot of his agency and fights back with his own kind of dialogue. So just that, I don't know how long it runs, 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, if that. It might run 5 minutes, Johnny, but when I'm watching it, it's like, oh, and in the theater when I watched it, I was like, what is happening? Like, this is so. And here's the thing with Tarantino's dialogue, and I think we mentioned this during Pulp Fiction, is that I don't know of another writer, director that could just have over the shoulder shots and medium close ups and tight close ups just for a 10-minute scene and have it be energetic and exciting and threatening and all this stuff, right? Tarantino's dialogue is so whip smart and so, I don't know, one of a kind that it feels like shots are like going really fast, even though it's just people talking. I don't know of another writer that I can be infatuated with the way just people talking, right? Because that's not cinematic. You're
Yeah.
not supposed to do that. And I think with Inglorious Bastards, he was able to take that and make the actual dialogue scenes cinematic, where there's actually suspense and a build. That movie is amazing. But again, focusing on this scene, number one, you have two 60s, 70s legends. We talked about Dennis Hopper, obviously, in Speed. We talked about his legacy. We talked about Christopher Walken and how awesome an actor he can be in Deer Hunter. You know, we talked about all that. How is it seeing these two legends sitting down across from each other? And I think Dennis Hopper even said himself, I don't know of any other movie where you can get a monologue and talk like and monologue at somebody and have such a great time. And it's like he really sunk his teeth into it. But there's so much threat and there's civility. You know, when Kakati punches him in the face and then he hands him like a handkerchief and
Yeah.
there's a moment to calm down and they're laughing at each other and it seems like they're enjoying each other's company. But I think Clifford is he's enraging Kakati in a certain way. But the fact that there's so much threat and you see him get punched in the face, Clifford, and you see them cut his hand, and there's a moment where Dennis Hopper on his face as Clifford, he resigns himself that he knows he's going to die, right?
Yep.
But
Yep.
if he's going to die, he's going to go out on his own terms. And that's when that Delibes, the opera music comes in, where he's kind of taking it back. After being threatened by Walken again, I could listen to Walken talk. He had that monologue about the pocket watch in Pulp Fiction. I'm like, man, just can you just have Walken like narrate like a movie? Like I can just listen to him talk Tarantino all the time. But you know, when he tells that story about the Sicilians, which is again is really racist, right? It's so racist, but I think he's doing that to egg or eggplant. You know, he's doing
Yeah.
that to egg Kakari
Yeah.
on, right?
Yeah.
To take back some agency and like I'm dead, but I'm not going to give up my son, and I'm going to go out on my terms. I'm not going to go out like a loser or a weakling. I'm going to take back. It's just so masterful, and I love the story how they just had one shot. I think they filmed Dennis Hopper on one day and Christopher Walken on another. And they originally had Walken set for the first day, but Walken, I believe, talked to Scott and said, "Please, please, please, just let me go after Dennis Hopper. Let me talk after Dennis Hopper or do the scene." And so Scott agreed. They shot it from Dennis Hopper's vantage point. And Scott says that as he watched Walken react to Dennis Hopper, he could see Walken kind of hone his performance and figure out where he wanted to go with it and play off of Hopper. And again, I think that's really cool. Christopher Walken saying, "I'm across from Dennis Hopper. I'm going to learn from this guy and build my performance off." Man, I could just, and
Yeah,
this is the scene that I've watched over and over and over again. It's just I just love, the lighting, the Jeffrey L. Kimball lighting, all that stuff. The spotlight, you can feel how hot it is, you can feel the threat. It's just, yeah, just
yeah.
wonderful, just wonderful.
Before it started, I turned to my wife and said, "This is Darren's favorite scene, so get ready. Here it comes."
Had she not
Yeah,
seen it before? Had Ruth not seen it?
she hadn't seen it for a long time, so she
Okay,
had kind of forgotten what was going on. But
right.
I was like, "Okay, get ready." Anyway, yeah, I agree with you. A total masterclass of acting. These two
Wow.
giants, and you got Jim Gandolfini in the background, and just
Making
every
his douchebag face that
yeah, everything was just, man, perfect. And like you, I can watch it over and over again. I never get tired of watching it. I love it when they have that moment where they start laughing with each other, and he like grabs his head and kisses his cheek and stuff. It's just such a great moment. And like you mentioned, and we said before about other performances in the past, when you can see an actor like as the character decide something, or you see it on their face, and you see their thoughts, and you don't have to have them say anything or like pretend or like show that they're thinking something. They just think it, and you see it yourself as the audience member. That's what I'm talking about. You see when Walken decides to kill him, and you see when Hopper realizes he's going to die. And
Yeah,
so when you know those moments, you go, "Oh, there it is!"
yeah.
Like, and I love that. So
Well, it's
awesome.
also the dialogue. Like they're sinking their teeth into this meaty dialogue that they're not used to getting. Speed, as much as I love Speed, it doesn't really have a moment that for this, like this for Hopper, right? He plays off his persona, but there's nowhere he gets to really monologue and really bite in some really chewy, delicious like words. And it's the same thing with Walken. The way that Walken spits certain words at him, like he is relishing every word. And I'm like, why can't we get this kind of acting in
Yeah.
every movie? Like I'm just so in love with this. It's just so fun. Even though it's threatening, even though it's really scary, it's so fun to watch. I don't know.
All right. So what's the next best or the next least
Well,
best?
it has to be the guy behind you.
Yeah.
Um Gary Oldman, I think we talked about him during The Fifth Element at least, right? We might have talked about him in other movies, but Gary Oldman might be my favorite actor on the planet. I just think that he can do anything. He can play Sid Vicious. He can play Dracula. He can play James Gordon. He can play Sirius Black. He can play, the worst, most despicable characters, whatever his name was from The Professional, which is just
Yeah.
hamming it up. Like he can just do anything. And you can, I think his Drexel character is the poster child for this movie. I think he's what the movie is. He's basically a mixture of everything, right? It's literally a Brit playing an American, playing a black stereotype. And he's just so in love. Again, the way he does his hair, the way he does his eyes, the makeup, his gold teeth. You can just tell Oldman's having a wonderful time just doing all this stuff. And I don't know. I just love him. I think he's funny, but he's also a threat. And when he smiles, like that scene where Clarence walks in with Tarantino movies, it's not so much the violence, which it's there, and this one has a ton of
It's
graphic
the lead
violence,
up to the violence.
the lead up and the threat, right? If you look at Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that whole movie seems to be scenes leading. Oh, is this going to be it? Are we going to break into violence? Uh-oh, like Brad Pitt character Cliff, he's on Spawn's ranch. Are we? He going to get killed? And it never does that until the very end when the Manson family or the cult members come in and they try to attack Cliff and their house or whatever. So yeah, it's all about the threat of violence, and when the violence comes, it's still really shocking. But when Clarence walks into that brothel and it's got the Nymphomania song just blaring, and it's the lights and the Mac again playing on the background, it's just, and we know what Drexel is capable of because we saw that scene with Samuel Jackson before we basically kills everybody. But I don't know, it's so fun watching Gary Oldman and sink his teeth into this dialogue.
Yeah. I love Oldman in this movie, and I love this character. It's so fun to watch, and I find myself laughing at a lot of his lines, even though they're not funny and I'm not supposed to be laughing at it. But the way he delivers it and the way he says certain things, like "Nah, no, I'm pretty," and then you just
Yeah.
like laugh at it. It's so funny. Um, but yeah, I'm so many people have tried to like copy this character and parodied it and put it in other movies, and I think that's the ultimate compliment when somebody like tries to parody your character or what you did and put it in their own movie. But yeah,
It's
I mean, this performance, this character, man, you
one of
can't
a
you
kind. Yeah.
so good, so
Right.
good.
Well, again, that scene is really well directed too, because the threat builds so much, and when Clarence finds, like, oh yeah, Drexel attacks him first. When Clarence is fighting back, and then he gets beat up, and again, you're like, do something, Clarence, like kill this guy, right? You really root for that. It's so visceral when Drexel stands up, and it's just the shot of Clarence raising the gun to his crotch, right? It's so visceral and it's so satisfying because you want to see that he's hitting him where, where it really hurts him, right? I don't know.
Yeah,
It's so when that violence breaks out, and again, maybe this is the difference. I don't laugh as much during the violence during this one as I do in other Tarantino movies. But and I think maybe that's the Tony Scott touch. He doesn't have kind of a lighter. There's no moment in here like in Pulp Fiction, which we shouldn't laugh at when Marvin gets shot, right? And John Travolta turns and he's like, "Oh man, I shot Marvin in the face." It's not funny in itself, but the scene is so shocking that we laugh at it because that's our only reaction that we can think of. I don't know if any of that is in here as much.
yeah. I mean, the only scene that I find myself laughing at, the violence wise, not because I like the violence or I think the violence is funny.
Yeah.
I'm laughing because, like you said, there's only one reaction I can give, and that's when Patricia Arquette ends up shooting James Gandolfini like over and
Ugh.
over and emptying the shotgun into him, and then she just like screams and shakes the shotgun. I
Yeah.
don't know why, but every time I watch that moment, I laugh, and I can't figure out why. I was like, "Why are you laughing at that?" And I'm like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
I'm laughing, but when it reminds me of the scene in Ferris Bueller where Jennifer Grey, grabs the phone and says, "Do you speak English?" I'm like, "Shut the phone." It's the same kind of thing that I would
Yeah.
laugh at. So when she shakes that shotgun, I just find it funny. But yeah, it's definitely not something you should laugh at.
Right,
Very
right.
violent.
Well, I do want to, after we talk about the performances, I want to come back and talk about the violence. So let's remember, and
Okay.
that scene
Sure.
in particular. But yeah, back to Oldman, man. So much, so unique, so one of a kind. He's having
Yeah.
such a great time. He used, I think, the same makeup or wig person that he had in Bram Stoker's Dracula to give him like the dreadlocks and things like that. But
Yeah.
he disappears.
Another performance we have to talk about is a Brad Pitt's Floyd.
Yeah.
Like I know it's a small part, but it's so funny, and he does such a good job as this character. And I laugh at everything he says. Whenever he's saying anything, I just start laughing.
Right.
But I know that he was like they asked him to play Clarence, I think, right? And then he was like, "Well, I can't play Clarence because he doesn't get revenge for his father's death and everything. I don't really see why he would do that.
Huh.
So I'd rather play this character Floyd that you got here. I really like this character." And so like, "Oh, you can play Floyd." And man, it is so funny. One of the funniest scenes when they come busting in and they got all these guns, and he's like smoking a bowl with a honey bear.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, "Oh man," he's so stoned. And they're asking where everybody went. And he's like, "No, yes." And they were here, then they went there. I just, man, so funny. I can't help it. I laugh my head off
Well,
during those.
I'm not going to do it any justice, but when again he's talking, they went that way. Oh, do you guys want to hit? And they cock their guns. Oh, so they went. It's so funny. But here's, aside from Brad Pitt's personal life, which I really don't want to talk about here because that leads us down a different rabbit hole. But when Brad Pitt started out, right? Before that, I think the idea is once you find out that an actor is a complete douchebag or a complete total monster, from that point, maybe you shouldn't like their stuff, but it's still okay to like their stuff before that because you don't associate their earlier stuff with how they are now, right? But when you look at Brad Pitt started out as a pretty boy, right? I mean, he was in Thelma and Louise, he was in River Runs Through It, and I was like, I don't want a pretty boy. I don't like this guy when I first watched him. I don't like this prettiness on him. But the fact that he does this, the fact that he does 12 Monkeys, the fact that he does
He's a
Seven,
vampire, yeah.
yeah, he's bending his image and he's playing around. So I love him in this movie because it's not the typical Brad Pitt take control of the screen kind of thing. He's just a background character. But again, he's sinking his teeth into whatever's there. And he's only in it for maybe 2 minutes, but he's really funny as Floyd. And it's such a he's such a standout character, you know what I mean? He could just be anything.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about during Arachnophobia where, there are characters that it looks like they're in the middle of something when a scene starts, where most movies would be like, oh, I'm on camera. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start. You know what I mean? What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, I think I mean, that's what they're good at. These actors that can do this craft and can, bring their A game to these movies. This is what they do, and this is what they're. That's why we cast them in these movies, because they know how to do it. But yeah, I think, man, you can't get any better than his Floyd.
Well, he exists off frame, right? He still exists even when he's like I said, he's living his life even when he's not on screen. You can tell he's back, with the fan in his face, watching TV, smoking a joint, whatever. So again, he's got this inner life and he's very memorable.
Yeah, definitely. Some smaller characters I think also gave some great performances. We can talk briefly about is um, well, yeah, James Gandolfini.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think he does a good job in that scene with Arquette. When I first saw it, I remember just being like disgusted by that character and being like so like, oh, what a bad evil person he is. I just
Yeah.
was like, oh my gosh, the way he just talks about what it's like killing people, and then beats up Alabama and everything.
And
And
getting such joy out of it, right?
yeah, so
The
when you see her get her revenge, it's really
yeah.
satisfying.
The note that I
Um,
had is that Gandolfini is so good at playing smug, smarmy douchebags that later in his career, The Sopranos, Tony Soprano is a part of this. He still has, it's like the best of both worlds. But when he turns and Get Shorty, say for instance, which we might be talking about in the future here, but when he turns out to be a good guy in that movie, it's so refreshing because he's so good at playing a jerk, and especially in Crimson Tide, he makes the same douchebaggy face the whole
yeah,
time in Crimson Tide that he makes in the trailer with Clifford and Kakani. But when he does a turn and turns good, it's so refreshing because you already like him as a bad guy. When he turns so good, oh, now I can enjoy you, right? Instead of
yeah,
it's the same thing with Gary Oldman. Like his turn in Batman Begins or in Harry Potter is like, oh, you can play a really sweet, lovable guy. You don't always have to be the dreadlocked kind of murderous psychopath. Like you can actually be warm and likable. And I don't know, I really like that about Gandolfini later on. But yeah, and here he's just there's no forgiving his character.
and then Bronson Pinchot. I grew up
Balky.
Donkey. I grew up watching Perfect Strangers, and so was that what it's called? Perfect Strangers?
Yep, that's what it's
Yeah.
called.
And yeah, so it was my first time seeing him do something different. And so I was kind of like, oh, he can actually act. I was like, oh, okay. And he's great in this movie. Like
Yeah.
I think he sells his part just fine.
Yeah, we know him from Perfect Strangers. We also know him as Serge from the Beverly Hills Cop movies. I think he's funny in that. I really Here's the thing, like originally in the script, they were supposed to meet Elliot at a zoo, and the whole scene was supposed to take like their dialogue at a zoo. And I think Tony Scott took it, was like, we can make this more interesting. Let's move it to a roller coaster, right? Which again, we talked about maybe Tony Scott has too heavy a hand for Tarantino to really make the irony kind of play off. But I think Tony Scott has a cinematic touch. Like that makes total sense. Let's put it on a roller coaster. Let's make it visceral. Let's make it like energetic. Let's make it visual. And I love that choice that they changed to. But the note that I wrote is like, and we've talked about this stuff before. I wish I could be a roller coaster guy, Johnny. I wish I could do that, but I can't. Like I'm him. I'm Elliot. When they're on that roller coaster, they're going up, and it's just Clarence just yammering. Yeah, he's not even caring. Clarence isn't even. He doesn't care that they're gonna drop, and it's just Elliot just scared out of his mind. I'm like, that's me. Why does that have to be me? Like, I wish I could be the roller coaster guy and go on these things and have a
Yeah.
great time doing loop de loops and then eat a burger afterwards instead of the
Yeah.
guy that throws up all over his sweater.
I was the roller coaster guy as a kid, but now I can't do it anymore. I gotta take some drugs to calm my stomach so I can do them if
Yeah.
I'm gonna do them. If not, I get sick. I got sick actually I got sick at SeaWorld.
Oh no. Okay.
We did like two rides back to back, and I was like, that was a mistake.
Oh
Ended up throwing up in the garbage can. Anyway,
yeah. Once that nausea hits you, it's bad.
yeah. So I can't do it anymore, but I used to be able to. Another great performance I think is Saul Rubinek. I
Yeah.
like him as the film producer. I think again, another guy you see him here and there, but in this movie he actually like stands out and he gives a memorable performance.
Well, again, Wheels Within Wheels. Number one, it's got Saul Rubinek and also the Lucy character that Clarence is talking to at the beginning. The
Mhm.
actress is Anna Thompson. Both Rubinek and Thompson are in Unforgiven, which was made the year previous to this. So I thought that was kind of a cool tie-in. But also, Saul Rubinek is playing a version of Joel Silver. And that's absolutely, he's like this energetic kind of blustering kind of idiot in a way, right? Like just talking himself up. And the Rubinek based his performance on Joel Silver, which
Yeah.
is funny because Tony Scott worked with Joel Silver on The Last Boy Scout, which apparently was a notoriously difficult production. Like Bruce Willis wasn't getting along with anybody. Joel Silver was obviously trying to push his hand, and so that was getting on Scott's nerves. So it's funny that Rubinek is kind of doing a riff on Joel Silver.
Yeah. And then we have to mention Tom Sizemore and not Sean Penn, Chris
His
Penn.
brother. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Both
Who,
dead.
they're both not here anymore, but
Yeah.
still great performances.
Well, as we record this, Michael Madsen actually died earlier today of cardiac arrest. And if you tie that back in, Chris Penn was obviously in Reservoir Dogs
Mhm.
with Michael Madsen. Michael Madsen is one of those character actors when he pops up, not just in Tarantino movies. I always love seeing Michael Madsen. He showed up at a James Bond movie, and I was thrilled that he was there for a James Bond movie. And so I don't know. I mean, obviously, maybe we want to talk about Kilmer next, but the fact that we don't have Chris Penn, we don't have Tom Sizemore, we don't have Dennis Hopper, we don't have Val Kilmer, all these, I don't know, we're losing a lot of our legends. You know what I mean? It was so fun seeing Chris Penn and Tom Sizemore play off each other. I don't know, in a very Tom Sizemore, Chris Penn kind of way. It was just great seeing him.
Yeah. Um, One more. Yeah, let's go with Val Kilmer next because I mean, it's a small part, probably one of the
Small,
smallest parts of the movie, but
but
it's
memorable. Yeah.
yeah, and it stands out, and you don't forget it. He plays Elvis. He plays Clarence's
Mentor.
invisible best
Yeah, yeah.
friend. um, yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on Kilmer's
Well,
performance?
Kilmer, I believe, was also supposed to play Clarence, and scheduling or something didn't work out. And so Scott gave him, again, worked with Tony Scott on Top Gun, would later work with him on Deja Vu, that kind of thing. But Val Kilmer, I don't know, like when just seeing him at the end of his career, when you see him in Top Gun Maverick, which again, he's so good in Top Gun Maverick, but the first thought that I had watching that movie was and I'm sorry if this is denigrating, but man, he used to be so beautiful. Like Val Kilmer's just, he's got this beautiful face that I don't know, he had that Elvis quality about him, which again, he played kind of a riff on Elvis in Top Secret, which is his first big movie. But I love it's such a memorable part because number one, it tells us that Clarence really isn't all there, right? Maybe he's too much into his obsession with Elvis. Maybe he's too much into pop culture. But the fact that he's got Elvis as a mentor, literally called mentor, because they couldn't get the rights to call him Elvis, even though they talk about Elvis throughout the whole movie, they
Yeah,
couldn't call this character Elvis. But I love, yeah, when Clarence talks about Elvis being one of the most beautiful men, right? Same thing with Kilmer. I'm like, yeah, cast him as Elvis because Kilmer is one of our most beautiful looking, godlike, kind of sculpted kind of figures. And even though he has that small part, I love his Elvis impression. I love that he's just, I don't know, it's so odd and it's so quirky having that as a choice.
yeah,
And it's just kind of a throwaway thing. I don't know. It's interesting, but nobody else. I think the story is Val Kilmer would call Tony Scott in the middle of the night singing Elvis songs to him. So again, very Kilmerish. I miss him. I miss all these actors.
yeah. One more, I guess, before we go to Christian Slater and Patricia Arquette, but Michael Rappaport.
Yeah.
Another actor that kind of shows up here and there, and I love him in Copland, and I like him in this a lot too. And I'm surprised he got the part, by the way.
Okay. Oh, for TJ Hooker, right? Because he says like one line and then that's enough.
Yeah, but again, I think it's a good part for him. I think he fits the character. I think he does a good job. He like everyone else, they all bring their A game. And I think they just make it work.
I think with Rappaport, like I don't think he's the greatest actor, and yeah, he's sinking his teeth into the part as much as he can. You know what I mean? I don't think he makes the same impression as Brad Pitt or
Yeah,
Dennis Hopper. Chris, he doesn't have that same kind of gravitas, but he pulls off
I
Dick
do
Ritchie
believe
pretty
him
well.
as the other roommate.
Yeah,
I believe him as that's how they would. That's their chemistry. That's how it would be. I mean, with
yeah.
the stoner and with the actor and everything.
Maybe that's
Um,
just how he's written. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
not. There's not a lot there.
but all right, let's jump into Slater because
Okay.
he obviously wasn't their first choice, but I think he does a good job. I don't have any problems with what he did. Yeah, I can't really find anything that I don't like about it. I mean, is there something you don't like about it that you want to bring up? Because I think he did a good job.
You know what? I don't think there's anything really wrong. I like Christian Slater. I've always liked Christian Slater. He's got a presence. He does a good Jack Nicholson impression. I think that he's as Clarence. Like here's the thing. Like he's not as bland as Tony Maria from West Side Story, right? He's not Richard Beymer, but they're us, right? They're our in characters. We obviously aren't going to identify with Drexel. We're not going to identify with Kakati. We're not going to identify, hopefully, with Floyd. We're not going to identify or with the gangsters or anything. But Clarence and Alabama, you really like them and you latch onto them. And I think Slater has, again, an innocence. I know he and Tony Scott had like differing opinions on how to play it. And then Tony Scott showed him, he made him watch Taxi Driver to kind of get more of an idea, which leans into that whole talking to Elvis thing, right? I think Clarence is so involved in pop culture that there's literally a scene when Alabama is just getting the tar kicked out of her, and you're kind of upset with him, even though he doesn't know. He's like, "Stop talking about Elvis with a total stranger. Get back to the hotel where your girlfriend is going to die." You kind of
Yeah,
get mad at him because he's so involved in that pop culture stuff. But
yeah,
again, that goes with part of it's part and parcel with everything. The note that I have is like, this is every nerd's dream. How would you like to talk a comic book and have a girl fall in love with you because you're talking comic books, right? That's every nerd's dream, I think. And I think Slater captures, even though I don't think he's as meaty as a Dennis Hopper or Christopher Walken or Gary Oldman, he plays the part with more meat than a Tony would from West Side Story, if that makes any sense. Because his first scene, there's a real awkwardness when he's talking to Lucy and he's talking about Elvis, and he finally has a moment where they bond, and then he's like, "Oh, would you want to go see a Sonny Chiba triple feature with me?" Right? He puts himself out there. When she says no, and she does turn him down in a way that tries to be nice, but it is in a way where she's like, "It's not my cup of tea." That just kind of stings. Obviously, she's not meant for me, but and then he does the thing, okay, where he's really awkward, and I think he sells that really well. When he's in the theater and Alabama spills her popcorn on him, he sells that awkwardness well. What I love is he gains confidence as he's with Alabama, to the point where after they get married, he's literally like, "Listen, I just want you to know that I'm here to protect you," right? He takes charge of their relationship, and you can see him gain confidence because of her. Does that make sense?
yeah.
So even though I don't think, again, he's as meat as ever, he plays the role with more meat than you would expect. And I think there's a real, like I said, when he pulls Alabama out of that hotel room and he's just saying, I'm sorry. It's like, oh, you're really selling this. Like, you're not just
Yeah.
bland guy trying to deliver a line. So does that make sense? I mean, he does a good job, does a great
I think
job,
other
actually.
actors could have done a good job too, but I think he was the right pick. I think we talked about the right person being cast for the role. I think he was the right person. Um,
Well, I think maybe that's the difference. Like I don't know if you could have gotten another actor to be as good as Gary Oldman. You know what I mean? I don't know if you could have gotten another actor to do what Dennis Hopper and Christopher Walken do in their
that's true.
scenes.
I will say that.
But you could get the way that Clarence is written, another actor could play the part equally well. You know what I mean? So maybe that's the difference. But I don't want to take away from his because I think Slater's really good.
Yeah, I agree. There's Arquette. Let's see. She has some great moments. The scene when she like confesses her love and everything they're on the billboard or whatever.
Yeah.
That's always been a good scene in my mind. The scene where she after he tells her that he killed Drexel and she says, "I think that's so romantic," and that also stands out.
Yeah.
And then of course I mentioned the scene where she kills Gandolfini, and that's a really good moment too. And then I don't know. At the end, this is something that's not really a big deal, but it's something that I always notice when I watch the movie. And that's when she's bawling over Slater when she thinks he's dead and he's laying there, he's been kind of grazed in the eye or whatever, and she's just sobbing and some spit kind of comes onto her lip, and then she kind of sucks it back up. Like
Yeah.
I wonder about those moments. Like are those moments that actors like can feel and are aware of, and then the moment they just kind of solve that problem, or is it something that they're so in the moment in the character that they don't know what's happening and it just kind of like organically happens and they just kind of go with it. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
wonder when I watch these kind of in movies and these performances. But anyway, I still think she did a great job.
Well, the thing with the spit, even if it's like not planned, it's not like you spit in itself is kind of a weird word because it's kind of a turn off. Like it's kind of a oh, like I don't want to think about that, right? But when she does that, it's I noticed it because it's like that's something that I've done, right? When you're crying or something
Sure.
like that, or you so it's a very human moment. So there's nothing wrong with it. The
Right.
note that I have is when they're outside and they're talking after the movie, the triple feature, and they're talking about eating pie or whatever, and then they go back to the diner when she's looking at Clarence, when she's looking at Christian Slater, and I think they had a relationship when they're making the movie, so that kind of plays off, or at least they dabbled a little bit with each other. But her eyes are laser focused on him. Like she's just on him. Like he's her whole world. And I'm like, again, she plays like the buxom, like the low cut shirt, like the blonde, the ditzy kind of fun blonde, sex pot kind of way, kind of thing. You know what I mean? But she, she's gorgeous to look at, obviously. But when she's talking to Clarence later, it's like I'm not like white trash, like I'm not like a whore, like that kind of thing. She really feels that she's a really genuine character. I think that Clarence and Alabama, I think what draws them together is they can be vulnerable with each other. They can be human with each other. Like all their faults and their foibles, they just kind of like wrap around each other in a way, and that's why we kind of fall in love with them. But yeah, I just think she's got an inner life. She's like I said, she's the Maria here. She's the in character, but she's got her own agency. I love the part where the Dick Ritchie character is like, "Did you really get that? Did that happen to your face? Were you playing basketball?" And just the way that she takes charge and she tells that lie, and it's like, I don't know, just she's really really solid, and she plays this again, this sex pot. In any other movie that wouldn't have an inner life, she gives the part an inner life, I think.
Yeah. I mean, like we talked about with Hopper and Walken, there's moments where you do know when they decide to kill or when they know they're going to be killed. You see the moment where she falls in love with him, and that's in the comic book store where he's showing her the comic, and you
Yeah.
see that moment that she actually falls in love with him, and you're like, oh wow, that's a good moment. And so, like I said, I love those kind of moments from actors in movies.
Well, I think that's a good sieg, and let's talk about the violence maybe for a little bit, especially one particular scene. She makes another choice. There's a choice that she makes, and again, it's in the script, so maybe anybody could have done it. But when Virgil is just almost beating her to death, and she's on that floor, and she sees I call it the Chekhov's corkscrew, because when they show up at the hotel the first time, you see Clarence like opening the bottle of champagne, but she looks at the ceiling mirrors and she sees it, right? She clocks it, and so that's what she's going to use to fight back. The moment that the Virgil character, did you actually put the money underneath the bed and he walks off? You can see her make a decision. And I wrote down, it's like, after all that she's been through, after all the shit that she's just been through, she's almost beaten to death. She knows she knows that she's about to die. She sees Virgil go for this money that's going to be her whole life. That's what her life depends on. Her and Clarence, their future together depends on that suitcase. She is not about to let that guy just walk out with that suitcase, right? After all she's been through. So she fights back. I love that decision where she steals herself and she turns over, and she's doubled over still because she's in pain. And Arquette really sells that, where your heart breaks for her because you know what's coming. But again, when she sticks him with the Gandolfini was weird, because I think he really wanted her to stick him in the foot with it. And they were like, no, we're not going to do that. But Johnny, we talked about this kind of off screen. Like, I had to look away during that scene. It feels like 15 minutes and it keeps cutting away, like I said, to Clarence, right? It feels like that scene goes on for 15, 20 minutes. It's so hard to watch. And
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you think it's because Arquette plays it so delicately that we don't want to see that happen to her?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm sure that plays into it. But like you, when I knew it was coming, I told my wife, I said, "Okay, this is hard to watch, so get ready. This is going to be tough." But
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely that plays into it. She has a vulnerability about her, and I think she
Yeah.
sells it well.
You
But
can,
I do like that when she holds that corkscrew up and she kind of holds it like a cross, like she's like trying to keep away a vampire or something.
yeah.
I thought that was pretty funny. But no, yeah,
Yeah. It's brutal. Like you can feel every hit. Like when he punches her in the stomach. Like, I can't believe I'm saying that. Like, we're watching this character we love get punched in the stomach, and
I will
just
say
her
this.
air knocked out of her.
I love the way it was shot. I love the way that scene was shot and put together. Like I think Jeffrey Kimball did a really good job.
Yeah.
Um,
But
yeah,
it's when she fights back again. Here's the interesting thing: she finally gets the upper hand. Again, it's chilling when she stabs him with the corkscrew and then hits him with the Elvis the can or whatever. And he gets up and he's like, "No more, Mr. Nice Guy." And you hear her react in a terrified way. And it cuts
mhm,
back and he throws her. Holy crap! He throws her through the glass like shower. Like
yeah,
he throws her through that, and then she laughs at him, and it causes him to like get so enraged that he grabs her hair. And when she fights back, and she shoves the shampoo into his face, and then does the flamethrower thing on her, and then bashes him with the with the toilet,
yeah,
and then like you said, she does the. It's so primal. Like I don't. she doesn't have any control of her facility. She's so enraged, and there's the adrenaline is pumping so hard that that's what she does. And it's just brutal when she cracks him against the skull over and over again with that shotgun. And it's I don't know, it's necessary. It seems like that's she just has no control over herself. The thing that's interesting with that scene is, like I said, it goes on, it seems like for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And when they submitted the movie to the MPAA, they had no issue with that. Tarantino says in his commentary that when the MPAA says we need to cut back, it's when Alabama starts fighting back. They were like, that's too much. And when I heard that, that enraged me, because it's like, so it's okay to show this guy beating the stuffing out of her and
Hmm.
almost near death and threaten to kill it, but it's not okay to see her fight back. And I get that it's brutal, but why is there that, you know what I mean? There's like a double standard in movies. I that just made me so mad. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like it's backwards. Like it shouldn't be that way.
Right.
But I do agree that it's pretty visceral, pretty hard to watch.
Yeah. That whole
But
thing.
satisfying at the same time. It's really,
Right.
really strange.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that covers all the performances.
But you mentioned Jeffrey L. Kimball. You wanted to say something about
Oh
him.
yeah, just that I have a I worked on a movie he was a cinematographer on. I worked on Bonneville.
Yeah.
And
But you didn't have any, you didn't throw teacups around the set or
no, there was a lot of crazy stories that I was aware of. I worked on it for like 2 weeks.
okay.
Then they went to Lake Powell, and I didn't go with
Okay.
that crew. But when I was there, I talked to him a little bit. He was nice, but I don't think he remembers me.
Did you know who he was? You obviously knew who he
Oh
was
yeah,
when.
sure. Once I knew who he was, I did some research. Oh, that's the guy who did True Romance. Yeah, I knew who he was. Yeah.
Okay. So he did Top Gun, Beverly Hills Cop 2,
Oh yeah.
Revenge, which Tarantino's a big fan of, Wild Things. It's funny. Mission Impossible 2. That's great. Again, eighth Mission Impossible movie just barely came out. Star Trek Nemesis. Bonneville. I'm seeing that right here. He did the sequel to Get Shorty. He did Be Cool. So
Oh yeah.
again, very good workhorse of a cinematographer, I think.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we need
I
to
don't
talk?
know. Like this, like we talked about, this is our like bucket list season. So this is a movie. I don't know, Johnny. When you mentioned this movie, I was like, I don't know, because like I said, I'm conflicted with it. It's a lot. Like this movie, even at the end during the Mexican shootout, like there's a part where the Chris Penn character kills one of the bad guys. I think his name is Eric Kramer. But yeah, Eric Allen Kramer, who actually shows up in some Disney Channel. Good Luck Charlie was a show that we watched with the kids when they were growing up. But when he shoots that character and it cuts to Alabama, you can hear the Chris Penn character like shoot him like 4 or 5 more times, like with this loud
Yeah.
shotgun blast of a pistol sound. And it's like even the shotgun blast or the gunshots were like, that's a lot. Like that's really excessive. But like I said, when you mentioned you want to do this movie, I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to dive back into that world. But like I said, I got really excited just to be able to talk about the Hopper walking scene, just be able to talk about some of the Oldman's performance, a lot of the stuff in here. I think that this is, like I said, this movie shook my world. It rocked my world when I saw it the first time, and it's watching it again. I was like, yeah, I can see why it still packs a good
Yeah.
punch.
Just don't watch Bram Stoker's and then From Dusk Till Dawn after it. It'll be
That's
fine.
true. That's true.
All right. I guess that does it for this
Yeah.
episode. So what's next?
Well, again, we talked about bangers. Is that a word that we're allowed to use, Johnny? We're like in our late 40s. Are we allowed to use the word banger? Like, I don't know. Like, but all the kids are using it, so I'll use it too. But there's a lot of really, like I said, solid action blockbusters that were released this year that we could have talked about, any number of them. But I want to talk about In the Line of Fire.
Oh, okay.
The Wolfgang Peterson with Clint Eastwood and John Malkovich. And we're going to have a special guest. It's somebody that we haven't had on for a long time. I don't know if anybody remembers. She was Jeanette Miller Mickenham back in the day, but now she's Jeanette Miller. We
Oh,
had her on for
night
Night
shift.
Shift episode. She was so fun to talk to, and I love watching her. Again, she's an actor and she's a director, and so she's doing, especially during COVID, she did all these things and that I've messaged her about, and I've been talking with her since. But I've wanted to have her back on the cast for a long time, and this was
Okay.
when we started this. I reached out to her and was like, "Is there a movie that you want to see out of these movies?" And she said, "Well, In the Line of Fire would be one." I'm like, "Yep, let's talk about that one." So we're going to talk In the Line of Fire with our friend Jeanette Miller.
That sounds good.
Okay,
Okay, for NostalgiaCast, I'm Johnny Craddock.
and I'm Darren Lumberg.
And I like you, Clarence. Always have. Always will.
Hey, get some beer and cleaning products.
Don't condescend me. I'll kill you.